We are live with another installment of our substack, Informed Resistance. We are unpacking the affronts of the Trump administration, talking about the lawlessness, and also bringing real solutions and ways to tackle it with a bunch of incredible guests. I'm so excited that today we are talking with Maurice Mitchell, National Director of Working Families Party and also Working Families Power, which engages in coalition building and organizing and leadership, advocacy, public education on policies like economic fairness and racial justice and gender equity and climate and democracy and everything that we all care about. So thrilled to have you here. Thanks for joining me today.
It's so good to be with you.
Yeah. And, as you know, we've been working really closely with working families on numerous issues over tons of years. You are a real visionary in this space. So just excited to unpack some of the great work that you all have been doing and dig in on some of the ways that we can all be fighting back together. So starting out with one of the big topics, which is just it has been hard for all of us dealing with the Trump administration, fighting authoritarianism, feeling this endless onslaught. Between our organizations, Public Citizen, Working Families, we have a lot in common in terms of the policies we push for, healthcare, democracy reform. We've been working hard on our own proactive agenda with the assumption that we will come out the other side of Trump. There will be an after Trump. And I've been really excited to see that you all have also been launching a yes agenda too, that you're thinking about this really hard. So I wanted to ask you about that, about the new Working Families Guarantee, what it is, why you felt it was important to launch it now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, well, I think we've seen over the past year and a half of Trump too, a lot of people, and we've been a part of this, getting out of the streets, no canes, and many other activations. And we're building the largest united front against authoritarianism. And that is basically a united front grounded on the things that we just fundamentally as Americans we reject, the things that we say no to, the things that we say with a clear, loud voice no, right? And many people who are going to vote in November on 2026, they're going to vote in order to register that no, right? It's going to be a lot of people who are going to be voting as a rebuke of Trump and MAGA, and so they'll be voting for Democrats. Now, what's also clear is that backlash energy and that sense of pushback, it doesn't sustain, right? And so in the midst of that, we need to be very clear about what we're fighting for, what we want to say yes to, right? We're clear about what we want to say no to. We don't want mass men, killing people and kidnapping people at their pleasure. We don't want to end the voting rights for Black folks and other Americans. We don't want lawless presidents to believe that they're kings. And we believe that there's a set of things that are not actually controversial for most people in the richest country in the history of the world. And we need to build that mass movement that is as vibrant, that is focused on those things. So that's where the Working Families Guarantee comes from. Now, the Working Families Guarantee is a set of ideas that I think many of the people listening won't actually be surprised by, right? This idea that we should have guaranteed healthcare, guaranteed childcare. We should have guaranteed time with our families when we need it. Paid family leave, which is the law in some states, but not everywhere. We believe that we should, in the wealthiest country, have guaranteed housing that is affordable, whether you're renting that housing or if you own that housing, and that your utility prices aren't boxing you out of being able to afford a home. These are things that we could all collaborate on and do. And most people believe that we should tax the uber wealthy to make it happen and get corporate money out of politics. So since we all agree on these things, let's just do them. Since we have the resources to make it happen, let's just invest those resources to make it happen. That's basically the idea behind the Working Families Guarantee. And let's recruit the leaders on every level of government and in Congress to ensure that it happens. And we believe that that's going to be necessary in order to build a lasting movement and make sure that the solidarity that we're feeling out in the streets isn't just a moment, that people are locked in for the long haul. I agree. There will be a moment where Trump will not be president, and there will be a future where MAGA will no longer be running rent free in everybody's heads, right? And in that moment, what are we going to do? What are the things that we want? What type of country do we want to be? What type of solidarity are we building? And what 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 is the thing that weaves together that solidarity? It has to be a plan of action that brings us all together, and it has to be some common values. And so, as an organizer, always trying to figure out what that plan is and what are the common values that weave us together. That's what Working Families Guarantee is about.
I love that. And I think so important to be putting forth these common sense, popular populist policies and just daring people to say they don't support them when everyone in the country does. So such clarity of vision, and I think so important to be explaining what we're for also and talking about these ideas now in advance of that election moment and also of the next Congress, where hopefully we have a chance to do some oversight of the things that have been going wrong. So one of the planks you mentioned, one of the pieces here, which Public Citizen strongly agrees with, is reining in out of control corporate influence. It's in our mission. And one of the places where we've just seen an explosion of corporate power and money and engagement is around artificial intelligence. Now, there are a lot of reasons to be nervous about AI, the lack of guardrails that protect privacy, the biases that are built into it, and obviously potential abuse and what it means for people's jobs and housing and lots of other implications. But one thing, additional thing to be nervous about is the money that they're spending and the influence they're wielding. At Public Citizen, we did some research looking at the amount of lobbyists on AI, and it's an insane explosion. It's I think 3,500 lobbyists. It's a quarter of all of the lobbyists that work at the federal level are lobbying on AI. And there's been a 500% increase of lobbying on data centers, which is obviously the engine, the unenvironmental engine of all of this in the country right now. So super worried about that from our perspective, the lobbyists, but there's also the money in politics piece, just the extensive spending that they're doing. So I wanted to ask, I know you guys have been doing some thinking about this, what you think we should be doing to fight back, how this plays into your all's priorities and obviously ways we could work together on this.
Yeah, I'm look, the general problem of corporate capture of our democracy, it just keeps on ratcheting it up, and we have to do something about it as everyday people. And so the influence of AI tech in our government and in our democracy is just the latest installment in this story that's been going on for quite a while. And look, if their ideas were popular, if people were really excited to have a data center built next to them, if people were cheering on these corporations and really happy about the idea of them potentially replacing their job or replacing whole categories of work, or if people felt really friendly with the idea of their children carrying on, close relationships with AI chatbots, what could go wrong with that, right? Uh, if if people in general felt a high degree of confidence with Elon Musk and Sam Altman and Peter Thiel, I didn't think they were excessively weird and creepy, then wouldn't need to spend all of this money in primary races. They wouldn't need to spend all this money with their consultants and with their lobbyists, because it would just be common sense. Like, this is a great industry. These are technologies that have a lot of upside. Of course, we should figure out how to support them. But that's not what's happening. People have raised serious concerns. These guys, they enchant a lot of the folks in Capitol Hill, but they don't fool us, right? We could see through their spin and their hype. And, like, you know, kill me, but when a corporate CEO claims like that their technology is going to cure cancer and solve climate change. All we need to do is just get out of the way, don't regulate them, give them all the land and they need, give them give them all of the energy they need so that they could pollute the air and, just add to climate change so that they could have more compute so that their big machines could become some sort of like mechanized gods that they could literally ask three questions to and then solve any problem. Forgive me if I have some doubts as to whether or not that's really possible. And actually hearing that makes me want to scrutinize your industry even more. And so at Working Families Party and Working Families Power, one of our responses is the guarantee. So people do have these anxieties about whether or not they're going to be able to afford to live in their homes, whether or not they're going to have a job. So we should have a jobs guarantee and we should have a housing guarantee, right? In order to deal with some of these potential disruptions to the job market that this industry potentially might provide for us, we need to regulate all industries, and that's true for AI. And, they like to talk about this inevitability, like it's here, it's going to be here, just kind of let it go. It's a fast moving train. All of those inevitability stories are designed to disempower us, right? The reality is that we could regulate this industry. The technology exists. We can't put the technology back in the bottle, but we sure could have an opinion about what the technology should do, and we should. And now is the time to do it. And I think there's a fork in the road, which is why I think they're so desperate in their spending. Why they're spending so much money in politics, both on the lobbying side, but also spending political money so that their preferred candidates make it through because they know that they're unpopular. They know that their ideas are unpopular. They know that people have these anxieties and want more regulation. And now is the time to regulate this industry. Now is the time to get people in Congress and people in state houses to ask these tough questions. So that's why they're spending so much, because if they could influence this next sort of class of incoming folks into Congress and into state houses and get them to toe the line for AI in this particular moment is going to have huge impacts over the next 10 years. They don't want anybody to regulate this industry. And that's more reason why we need to ensure that they don't get their hand-picked people into Congress, which is why I'm really excited that we had a great election Tuesday in Pennsylvania, where we elected a number of people who don't take any AI, crypto, APAC money. We know they're not on the take. And so they'll be free to scrutinize these industries. And we need more elected officials who are free to do those things. And we know that when you're in that corporate tight jack, when we're in that sort of corporate sort of tight jacket, it's hard to be able to do that. It just simply is. When you go back and forth from Silicon Valley and you go to these crypto or AI fundraisers and you convince them that the water is fine on your side of the aisle, that you'll provide a safe regulatory environment for that industry. It's kind of hard to incredulous to imagine that you do that on a Monday, and then on a Tuesday, you could be a populist fighter for the people. And so that's why we see so many politicians kind of clam up when people ask them, are you going to hold these corporations accountable? Are you going to stop the building of this data center in my community? Are you going to scrutinize this data center and find out whether or not they're going to be sending particulates into the air?
Mhm.
A lot of the political class, both Republicans and Democrats, they kind of clam up because of all of those lobbyists, all of that money, and we need to interrupt that.
Absolutely. And, these kind of the straitjacket, as you talked about it, or we sometimes talk about the golden corporate handcuffs. It's the same concept. The idea that once you engage deeply and you feel that you owe your seat to any particular entity, it is incredibly challenging to regulate. And that is what has happened with industry after industry. And I think, this is a moment for AI and for crypto where we're kind of at the beginning, but we won't be there for very long. And so we have to do these guardrails now before more harms ensue. So we are right there with you, thinking about this a lot, in particular pushing state level legislation where we've had more success than at the federal level, where they've already taken a lot more money, passing legislation that regulates deepfakes in elections, or intimate image deepfakes generated by AI, chatbot regulation, all of that. It's essential. But even as we do that at the federal level, some of our opponents are pushing to preempt all of that law. So there's a lot to do, and really excited to be in partnership with you guys on this particular fight as we move forward. There are so many corporate bad actors. We could talk about them forever. I wanted to shift to talk about healthcare for a minute. Obviously, we've got the pharma industry and the healthcare insurance industry on the other side. In that area, earlier this year, we worked really closely with you all. Amira on your team, want to name check her? Just fantastic work pushing to try to extend the ACA tax credit and pushing Democrats to shut down the government over this topic, over healthcare. And we were successful in getting them to resolve to fight, which I
Yep.
think is different. You know, throughout the Trump era, we've all been pushing Democrats to stand up, to fight harder, to push back. And this is maybe one of the first times that we saw some of that really come to being, where they held the line in a different way. So I wanted to get your take on that kind of courage and why that happened, what that meant, and then also how important it is for them to keep picking these fights, to keep this orientation, and how you guys are thinking about it.
Well, power doesn't concede anything without a fight. That's true everywhere. That's true with every institution. That's true inside the Democratic Party. We need a real opposition party in this country. That's why the Working Families Party exists. Uh, and what we learned with the Democrats and the ACA fight is that they need to experience extraordinary pressure, that the political establishment needs to experience extraordinary pressure from the outside for them to do their job on the inside. And we, the people, need to demonstrate the leadership, right? I like to always say that, politicians, they understand the political weather, but they generally, on most days, do not change the political climate. So if they go outside and they notice it's raining, they're going to take an umbrella, right? It's our job to change the political climate so the politicians inside the Democratic Party respond to the moment, right? We can't expect them to lead, right? Because they're reactive to the political conditions that they find themselves in. We need to change the political conditions. And that ACA fight is a good example of us changing the political conditions. We made it untenable for Democrats to align with ICE. That was not true last, right? We made it untenable for Democrats in Congress not to show some fight. That wasn't true not too long ago, right? So what we know is that by organizing, by protesting, by raising hell, by being uncompromising with our vision of what we believe an opposition party should be, that will create a real choice for Democrats. If they understand that there is a binary choice, you could, if you have elected power, if you are in a governing position, you could either be a fighter or you could be compliant. And we articulate what fighters look like and we reward fighters. Well, they also are creatures of both positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. And it's our job to reward fighters, and it's also our job to hold accountable those that are compliant in this moment.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on that front. And I think we are already seeing dividends. As you mentioned, the next shutdown inflection point after that healthcare battle, where they chose to shut down the DHS title because we needed the reforms to ICE and CBP. That wouldn't have happened without the pressure we applied previously and without them understanding that this orientation, this fight, is rewarded. And not only is it the right thing to do, but it's rewarded and there's a feedback loop that they can understand. So just completely agree, and also love that frame about the climate and the umbrella and changing it all. Um, so I wanted to talk a little bit more about corruption. We've talked about money in politics and kind of the whole system, but I think no one can talk about corruption nowadays without talking about the corruptor in chief, Donald Trump. And there have been a few things that have broken through over the last month and even over the last week. There's the ballroom, but over this last couple days, people are very exercised, as they should be, about this latest absurdity. Trump suing his own government to try to get recompense for his, upsetness for the leak of his tax returns years ago. And then instead of finishing that case, because the judge was calling out the fact that he was both the plaintiff and the defendant, he settled for $1.8 billion that he can give to whoever he wants, targeted players like those poor people who stormed the Capitol on January 6th. Or there's no stipulation that he can't give it to himself or to his sons for the wrongs they've experienced. And so this is so appalling, so disgusting, taking our taxpayer money and letting him distribute it however he wants, that it is really breaking through. And so I wanted to ask you how you guys are thinking about the corruption narrative, how it connects to the economic populism and healthcare and your other core issues, and how you think it connects to the fall election.
Yeah, well, most people do not like corruption. It's a cross-partisan, cross-ideological disgust that most people have when it comes to political corruption. And I think this is one of the reasons why Trump's approval ratings are as low as they are. Uh, there are people who are Trump and MAGA loyalists, right? And, that's, I don't know, maybe 13% of the population. And then there's everybody else. And when they see that rank corruption, they most people recoil. Most people, it makes them really question the direction the country's going, and it really discredits the leadership of Trump and the leadership of the MAGA movement. And I've said this many times that their overreach and their corruption, their cruelty, their incompetence, um, it is the poison pill for their movement. Now, had Trump had some discipline, had Trump even tried to hide his corruption, had Trump, we might be, our politics might be different, but it's so blatant that I think it's creating a lot of defections, and it's also stealing the spine of people who understood day one what it is. The other thing I'll say about this and how this fits into the moment I think we're in, I believe that we're in for sure a populist moment where you talked about AI. I actually think um that the populism that people are feeling, the rejection of the status quo, the rejection of the two-party system, the rejection of status quo politicians, the rejection of MAGA and Trump is part of a bigger story where just people just feel, and they're correct, that um, people with a lot of money and therefore more power than they deserve are not held accountable, no matter what. That is what the Epstein files and that story is ultimately about. That is what the story of Trump's corruption is ultimately about. That is what people have been experiencing from quite some time, right? The people who are responsible, the big banks are responsible for the 2010 economic collapse. None of those people ever got any accountability. Nothing really happened with them. Um, Folks inside the Trump administration, like they didn't face any accountability. The 1,600 people who stormed the Capitol, they got a reprieve from Trump, right? And I think what people want more than ever is for wrongdoers to be held accountable, and for somebody to stand up for them and their family, and which is why those fighters, and we see this like Ana Lilia Mejia in a New Jersey suburb. She was clearly the fighter in that race. Chris Rabb in one of the bluest congressional districts in Philly on Tuesday. He clearly was a fighter in that race. I think people are really responding to fighters because they want to believe that somebody might champion them against people with undue money and power. And so this, if there's a populist moment that is kind of connecting all these folks across ideology, across region, across race and ethnicity, that as an organizer, I get excited because we could build a really broad coalition, an anti-corruption populist coalition that says, hey, we're going to hold these corporate guys accountable. We're going to hold these AI tech guys accountable. We're going to hold Trump and MAGA accountable when they say America first, but they don't deliver on that. And I think that that's what people desire, despite all of their lived experience of that never happening. The American people still desperately want that and are willing to fight and organize for that. And like I said before, are are more than willing to to support and reward political actors and organizations and leaders that also have that fight in them.
I completely agree. And I love the idea of taking on corporate power being the central thread that unifies across different policy areas. You don't have to agree, even though you and I do primarily, on what kind of healthcare or what kind of substantive solution we need to understand that you are not getting it under this current setup. And the reason for that is this outsized, David and Goliath corporate power behemoths that are in bed with our current politicians and are keeping our system from working for us. So just completely agree that this is the thing we need to lead into. And I too am really excited about it, seeing it emerge in a lot of different places and with people with different perspectives on the solutions. Um, so we could keep talking forever. I have so many things I want to talk to you about, but we are at the end of our time. So I want to thank you so much for joining us on Informed Resistance. Again, this is Public Citizens Substack, where we try to unpack all the bad things that are happening from the Trump administration. We talk about all the lawlessness, but also provide solutions and perspectives on how to move ahead. And Mo has done that with us so ably today. Do you want to share a little bit about how people can find Working Families Power and Party and where they can seek you all out?
Sure. So on any of the platforms that are currently owned by these tech villains, you could go to at Working Families, and you could also find me on any of those platforms. You could go to at Maurice WFP. You could also on the internet go to workingfamilies.org. And you could also, on your phone, text WFP to 30403. So those are all the ways you can find us. We'd love to talk to you. There's probably a local candidate that we are supporting. We'd love to get you involved in that fight. You could count on them to not be bought and paid for by those creepy crypto and AI guys, and are down to stand in the front and fight for your families. So yeah, definitely looking forward to talking more and really appreciate the partnership between Public Citizen and Working Families. It's been a great partnership.
Absolutely. Back at you. Thanks so much again for being with us and everyone listening out there. Until next time on Informed Resistance. Appreciate you all.